We interrupt our program to bring you this important message.
Welcome to Africa Chess Update. Please don't forget to click the like button and subscribe for more chess videos.
Hello chess lovers and welcome to Africa Chess Updates. I am Candidate Master DJM, and on this channel we try to promote African chess. We talk about chess news, African chess views, and who's. Today the game we're going to look at was played between famous international master from South Africa. I think those of you in the chess scene who've been in the chess scene in Southern Africa will know him quite well, international master WATU KOBESE. And in this game he was playing none other than the challenger from the last World Championship match, FABIANO CARUANA, who actually played Magnus Carlsen and actually drew 6-6 in the classical match and just lost in the rapid playoffs. Of course, when this game was played, he wasn't the challenger to the World Championship, to the World Champion, yeah. But he was still a strong grandmaster at the time. So without further ado, let's get into the game. So after e4, e5, knight f3, knight c6, we had the Spanish. After a6, bishop a4, knight f6 and short castles. Here is the first point maybe that I want to talk about. Here black has the option of playing an open Spanish or closed Spanish. Now you could play open Spanish by just capturing on e4, and this move is not as dangerous as it looks. For instance, the move rook e1 here doesn't actually achieve much for white. I mean, black could play either probably nd6 or nc5. Let's say after bishop takes and d takes c6, where the white takes on e5 with the knight or the rook, then black just blocks the e file, and it's really, white really doesn't have anything. For instance, if knight takes e5, then you can just play knight to e6 here, and black doesn't really have anything. The more common move after knight takes e4 is, and probably the stronger move, is d4. And black usually responds by playing b5. After bishop b3, there's d5, d takes e6, and bishop to e6. A lot of games have been played from this position. I remember Anand actually played this in his, I think it was 1995 World Championship match with Kasparov, and actually lost a very painful game here from this position. He walked into some of Kasparov's famous, preparation. So in this game, WATU actually didn't play knight takes e4. He didn't go for the open Spanish. Okay, so after short castles, he simply played bishop e7, and now after rook e1, white is threatening to capture on c6 here, and then capture the pawn on e5. So that necessitates b5, and after bishop to b3, black just castled. Now black has two moves here after bishop to b3. He could castle, or he could play pawn to d6. Okay, normally these it just transposes back into the same position, but castles is more flexible because it retains the option of playing d5 here. If white plays, let's say after white plays the standard move c3, black here can continue d5, and then this is a Marshall Gambit. If white accepts the gambit, let's say we're playing pawn takes, knight takes d5, knight e5, N e5, rook e5, and c6. The idea behind the Marshall is that even though black has given up the pawn on e5, in gaining the pawn on e5, white has exchanged his knight on f3, which was the only minor piece which is guarding the king side. The bishop is already all the way on b3, it's on the queen side, so the knight was the only minor piece that was guarding the king. And so in this position, his king side is a bit exposed. So say after maybe like d4, bishop d6, rook e1 is a common move, queen h4, and g3, queen h3. This is all theory, by the way. You know, black usually can come up with some sort of attack, even though, you know, white also has resources here. I know Levonoronian is one of the famous exponents of the Marshall, and it says they always say like Levonoronian has never lost with the Marshall, and is quite proud of that record. So it's a pretty you know convincing gambit. You always get a good position if you like attacking positions, and you can always look at this and see if this is your cup of tea. But in our game, WATU didn't actually go for the Marshall here. After c3, he just played d6. Okay, and white plays h3. White in this position could also just continue d4, you know, and then black would then take advantage of the fact that h3 wasn't played to play bishop to g4. And white normally plays here, I think, bishop to e3. And I think black continues e takes d4, c takes d4, and d5. He can actually take the pawn on e4. This would lose immediately after bishop to d5. So, you know, this is also another variation, but, you know, some players actually don't, and it makes sense, you know, some players don't enjoy being pinned, you know, so after d6, yeah, they just prefer to play h3, and it's always a useful move in preparation for d4. So they spend an extra tempo on h3. Black here then has a number of moves here. In the closed Spanish, he can continue n to b8 as one move. This is the Breas variation. He intends to take his knight to d7 and play c5 and expand on the queen side. Another move here that black has is just rook to e8. This is the Smyslov variation. It's also possible. He also has bishop to b7, which is the archangel variation. But in this game, WATU decided to play the Chigorin variation, which begins with knight to a5. It's pretty much the same ideas as the Brea, because you just want to expand as well on the queen side and put your bishop probably on the long diagonal. White here plays bishop c2, because if he doesn't move the bishop, black's just going to take it. You know, in most openings where white opens with e4, you know, his light squared bishop tends to be the more active bishop, so it makes sense to, you know, try and preserve that bishop. After bishop c2, black continued c5, and after d4, there's queen to c7, and after b to d2, black played c takes d4, and c6. So at this point, white has to make a choice here. He's got a choice between probably he's got three different moves he could play here, and they all have to do with what he wants to do with the center. Because, I mean, he could close the center or just, you know, try and maintain tension in the center. And we'll look at the decision that Caruana played after. Actually wanted to just give you a few seconds for those of you who are new to the channel, or for those of you who haven't subscribed. I'd just like to ask you maybe to take a few seconds to subscribe and switch on the notifications for the channel, or click like, or leave a comment. Okay, so in this position, if white plays, okay, let's say if white decides to close the center with pawn to d5, black just continues nb4, attacking the light squared bishop once again, and after either bishop to b3 or bishop to b1, black just plays a5 because his knight's not so secure on b4, with the intention of rerouting the knight to c5 after a3, maybe in na6, and nc5 has got a perfectly normal position here, and he's going to play on the queen side here because already has an open c file there, and his knight is well positioned on c5. Apart from g5, black also has here, after nc6, black also has here n to b3, just to try and maintain tension in the center. White has nb3, sorry. Black here can continue with pawn to a5 to try and dislodge that knight on b3. After bishop e3, reinforcing the center, then a4, nbd2, and I think the common move here is bishop to d7. Okay, so after rook c1, and this is all theory as well, just queen b7. I'm just trying to play probably the most common moves or the main lines here in this variation. nf1, rook fc8, ng3, and here the computer suggests bishop to d8, which makes sense, of course, if you think about it, because black, I mean, normally in these positions, going to play mostly on the queen side. It's going to be hard for him. Obviously, he can't play on the king side because his pieces are so far away from there. So the bishop on e7 is probably not so well placed there, and it makes sense to try and bring it over to, either you can bring it over to a5 or to b6, where it contributes to black's play on the queen side. So Caruana in this position decided to go for pawn to a3, just a temporary pawn sacrifice, and after e takes, he played n to b3. WATU here played probably a relatively, probably not a usual move. He played n to d7. Another move he could have played here was bishop to b7, just placing the bishop on the long diagonal, so that after knight takes d4, knight takes d4, knight takes d4, he'll just play rook e8, and basically his entire game plan at this point revolves around putting pressure on white's last remaining pawn in the center. Say for instance bishop to f4, you would play bishop f8 here, attacking the pawn, and after f3 maybe go for queen b6. So he's just trying to, in this case, black doesn't play as much on the queen side as he does in the center. He could always bring his other rook to d8 and try and achieve d5. In openings where white plays, let's say e4, he's got e4, and black exchanges the c pawn for the d pawn, like as in the Sicilian. Achieving d5 always guarantees black equality. Say for instance in this position, if white plays bishop to e3, then d5 just works here. nf5 doesn't work because of bishop c5, and black really has nothing to worry about here. And if for instance pawn takes d5, then after knight takes e5, black is completely fine. I mean, all his pieces are well placed, and white can't claim any advantage here. I mean, if you lose from this position, it has nothing to do with the opening. Okay, so but WATU went for probably a less known move here. He went for knight to d7. Okay, just hold on. After a3, e takes d4, nb3. Oh yeah, just here. He went for n to d7. Excuse me. And Caruana continued knight times d4. And there was knight to e5. And after bishop to f4, what to play bishop to e6. So when I first saw this game, I actually, the bishop e6 struck me as a curious move, because I was wondering, can't white just double the pawns on the e file by playing, for instance, n times let's say n times e6 or bishop times e5. Okay, let's go bishop times e5. Then maybe if d times e5, something like n times e6 and f times e6. But you kind of notice that this is actually not really dangerous for black, in that he gets very strong control of the dark squares. I mean, his bishop can come to c5, and whether you take, I don't think whether you take the pawn or not on e6 is very important. I mean, you already have opposite colored bishops, in this position, and I think black gets a good position if white goes for this line. For instance, let's say in this position, black went n takes e6, white goes n takes e6, and after n takes e6, bishop takes, knight takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, e5. If white goes bishop b3, black can play, let's say, queen to b6. And I'm just showing this variation to illustrate what I mean when I say the bishop on the dark squared bishop gets really strong in this line. White can't play a move like, let's say, queen e2 because of rook times f2, which just wins on the spot. After queen takes, this is just bishop c5, and this doesn't work to deflect the queen just because of king to h8. So even if white in this position defends like, let's say, rook f1, this dark squared bishop always has a good square on d4. Like, let's say bishop c5, maybe queen to e2 and bishop d4. And that's a very strong bishop, which is impossible actually to remove the bishop from that square. So all these possibilities were always going to exist if the exchange if the exchanges on the e file had taken place. So I guess that's why Caruana delayed to exchange. After bishop e6 here, he played rook c1. Then after excuse me, then after rook to c8, he played he captured the bishop. And what to reply to the intermezzo, knight takes f3 with a check. White practically forced to take with the queen, and after f takes e6, Caruana here went for a very sharp line with pawn to e5. So this attack actually is only good enough for a draw. And I guess probably Caruana's hoping that maybe WATU would go wrong somewhere, but I think he underestimated the legendary South African international master, because I actually had the pleasure of watching WATU play Blitz online once in South Africa, and one thing I noticed that he's a very resilient player. Just when you think he's down and out, he always finds that extra resource. And I think Caruana found out the hard way in this game. After e5, WATU actually bravely captured, which is obviously the correct approach. Then after d takes, there was queen to h5 and rook times f4. So allowing a brave decision, allowing white to take on h7 with check. I'm sure it calculated it all through and seen that this actually doesn't lead to any sort of a mate. I think I should say here, even queen to, after d takes, even queen e4 just leads to the same thing, can still be answered with rook times f4. Because queen times h7 check can be met by king to g6, you know, and bishop check can be met by king to f6. So it's not so, I mean, it's not really, although it looks bad, of course, you know, visually, you know, it's not so easy for white here to make any sort of progress. So Caruana himself decided to go for okay, I've lost myself. Caruana decided to go for queen h5, then after rook times f4, he played queen takes h7 check. Obviously, the only move. He played queen h8, and after king f7, queen h5, after king f8. He could have, at this point, repeated and immediately and just, you know, agreed on the draw here. But he tried to go for more. I think he wanted more in this position, but actually here now, this move bishop e4, according to the machine, actually doesn't work. You know, black can simply just play rook takes e4 here, and it gives black a slight plus. Okay, another move which is possible here, and I think which was played in the game after bishop to e4, was rook to h4. Then after queen to f3 check, there's rook f4. So queen h5, we just get a repetition of the same position. Caruana played queen c3, and there was queen to b6. So at this point, his attack on the king side has failed here. The king is now completely safe, and he has to get compensation for his sacrificed piece somehow. He has to recapture on c6 here. But actually, in this position, the computer gives also queen times f2 or rook times f2 as just winning for, I mean, a large advantage for black, like plus 1 point something here. Because for instance, if let's say queen times f2 check, king h1 and bishop f6 securing the pawn on e5, there's really, you know, white is just a pawn down, and he doesn't even have a better position. All of black's pieces are in his territory, and except the bishop on f6, which does a good job of defending the king, and his own bishop on c6 is pinned. You know, so black is actually doing much better here. Also, the variation rook takes f2 also was possible, threatening a discovered check, obviously, against and after king h1, then just rook to f5 is another possible variation here. So in this position, after bishop to c6, WATU played rook to c4, and after queen f3 check, because he has to defend the bishop, there's rook to f4. Now the thing is, the queen can't leave either the c file or the a8 h1 diagonal, otherwise he loses the bishop, you know. And after queen c3, rook c4 was played again, and the game was redrawn. So I don't actually know what the match situation was, because this game was played at the Olympiad in I think in 2008 in Germany. So I don't know what the match situation was that compelled WATU to go for the repetition here, because both queen takes, you know, f2 and rook takes f2 are quite tempting here. But I think we can all agree that black here has a better position here, and only black can win from this position. And so I think, you know, it says a lot, and it speaks to the volume of talent that the South African international master has, to be able to, you know, to hold his nerves and play well in such a complex position, you know, with his king under attack, and actually come out from the entire thing on top. So after rook c4 here, we have a draw by repetition, and that's how the game ended. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed the game. If you have any comments, please just leave them below. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you enjoy the videos, if you want to watch more videos, and if you have any suggestions, maybe games you want us to look at, please let me know. And thank you for watching. I'll catch you next time on Africa Chess Update.